what's going on, guys? It's OGCP Da Silva. Welcome back. This is part 2 of Road to Soldier. Where I left off last was the shark attack. And by the way, moving on from here, I don't want to drag along the whole, 10 weeks of what I've been doing, in detail. So I'm just going to highlight what I found to be the most important and most significant in my training. And by the way, this is some Titanfall gameplay. It's been, something that I've been anticipating the most during my time gone, so it's finally up here on my channel, and I'll talk a little bit more about Titanfall in another video. But as far as this gameplay goes, enjoy it in the background. So yeah, with that being said, part 2, after the shark attack, we basically got into our companies, and my company housed different platoons with different names, and each of the platoons had their own unique name that the drill sergeants themselves named. And I was part of 2nd platoon, and we were called Wolfpack. So that just suddenly became my new favorite animal, which is a wolf, obviously. So Wolfpack. Our platoon was filled with a whole bunch of personalities, man. And there were a lot of people that I had to work with that I didn't really agree with, if you know what I mean. Like, there's a lot of different personalities that just don't really get along with your personality. Like, people just butt heads constantly because people have different ways of seeing things, and a lot of times it was challenging. It was challenging to get along with these different types of personalities, and it just was very difficult for us to see eye to eye with a lot of things that we were doing on a day-to-day basis. But a lot of times also, these differences helped each other out. Seeing things from a different viewpoint helped us out, and we definitely stuck together even though we were totally different. That's what was the beauty of the Army, the fact that people can have all different walks of life and come together for a common goal and accomplish whatever the task has been set forward for us to do. Either that's by the drill sergeants or the training itself. So that was pretty interesting, I thought, throughout my military basic training experience. But moving on from there, I could say that our basic schedule in the mornings was to wake up at 4:45 and have 5:30 formation, where we as a company got together and did PT. And PT sessions would take about an hour long for us to do. And after that, we would have breakfast, and then from breakfast, whatever was on the schedule for us to do, the training for that day, we would do and commit to. So basically that would outline our mornings every single day, where we would wake up at 4:45 and then have formation at 5:30. So in between that time, we also had to fight to get the sinks, get the restroom, toilets, whatever we had to do, because there were about 50 something, or actually 60 people in a bay, or the area that we slept in. And then we had 2 bunks, right, like a bunk bed set up, where you and your battle buddy, and by the way, that's what we called each other, you and a friend, basically, we're called battle buddies. So all my battle buddies, had to get a spot to get in there early so they could get all their stuff done, personal hygiene stuff, and that's what we did. And I was usually one of the first to get up and brush my teeth, pee, whatever, and then start getting ready. So and the reason for me being first, like usually one of the first people to do that and wake up, is because of my job. If you guys know already, I wake up super early for my job. I wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, and then I start my shift at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'm expected to go up on the floors, draw people's blood. If you didn't already know that, well, there you go. That's my job, what I do in the real world here back home. But anyways, yeah, it wasn't that tough for me to wake up to that schedule super early, but a lot of people, since they're not used to that, they had a tough time with that. I can tell you, you had to constantly shake people and wake them up, and tell them to wake up because it's time to get out. We had a set limit, to get out in formation, in our PT clothes and be ready for the day. Otherwise, we'd be yelled at or we got smoked. And basically, what a smoking is where we get punished, or get down and do push-ups or V-ups, different exercises, whatever the drill sergeant wanted us to do. and that would be called the smoking session. So, you know, we always had to do right, and if even one person messed up, it would be a mass punishment, so all of us suffered. It sucked. It absolutely sucked, because, man, there were a lot of people that just didn't do right. There weren't people that were always on time, and all of us suffered because of it. So it was totally unfair, but it just, there was a reasoning behind that, because they wanted us to be all in sync as a team, you know, as a platoon. They wanted us to be all together, and that was the team building exercise that they wanted us to implement throughout all of our time in training. And you know, it was probably the worst time for all of us to have that cohesion, because not all of us agreed, like I said before, and a lot of times because of that disagreement, you know, the drill sergeants definitely smoked us quite a bit. But you know, I wrote down while I was there at basic training some of the things that I found to be most significant. Let's see, I have them written down over here. FTX1. We had 3 FTXs, by the way, and FTX is field training exercise. And FTX1, our very first field training exercise, we had to rug march. Now, rug marching is where we have all of our gear on. You know, we have a vest called an IBA, which is basically like, we have plates in our vests, which is kind of like a bulletproof vest. We wear that, we wear our helmet, we wear a pouch where it holds all of our magazines for us to hold for our weapons, and then of course we have our M16s, which we had to carry with us everywhere. If we left it somewhere and we didn't know where we left our M16s, we would get in a lot of trouble, and it would just be crazy pandemonium, because everybody would think it was a big deal, because it was a big deal, because that's a freaking weapon, man. It's a real freaking weapon. But none of us had live bullets. They would never give us actual bullets until we would actually shoot on the range, which wasn't for a while. But our M16s were our babies. We would always have them wherever we went. We would always have them by our side, even when we went to the restroom. We would always sleep with them everywhere. But you know, we would have all of our gear when we went on our FTX, but the FTX1 that I'm talking about was terribly cold. And you guys have heard me say that before with the cold, but like my hands were like frozen numb. It was so hard to hold your M16 because your hands were touching metal as well. And you know, just going throughout that whole process was just insane, man. I mean, honestly, I don't know how people in Russia do it with the cold, but over here in the south, it was definitely something that was tough. Made the training 10 times worse in my opinion. But FTX1 field training exercise, where we rug marched to the actual spot and then did the training, you know, they taught us different techniques and stuff like that, was definitely something that was very trying, a very trying time for me. But that's all I have for today. I'll talk about something else in my next Road to Soldier. But anyways, take care guys. This is OGCP Da Silva, and I am signing off.